You think Victorians were all stiff manners and sensible shoes? Oh, you sweet summer child. This era was a glorious, high-definition circus of pure, unadulterated madness. We're talking folks who feared tomatoes like tiny red demons, treated mummy unwrapping like a Tupperware party, and believed furniture legs were basically pornography. Forget dry textbooks. These are the jaw-droppingly absurd, utterly baffling, and hilariously dumb things actual humans did. Let's dissect 33 facts about the Victorian era so utterly bizarre, you'll ask if they were sipping tea or something much, much stronger. 1. Imagine you're a Victorian gent poised for the winning billiards shot, channeling your inner pool shark. You strike with finesse and boom! The ball doesn't just crack, it detonates like a tiny festive grenade. Early billiard balls were made of celluloid, a substance so chill it occasionally decided to spontaneously combust from a hard hit, a sudden draft, or perhaps if you looked at it disrespectfully. Pubs literally had procedures for when the balls went rogue. Forget sinking the 8-ball. Your main goal was not to accidentally torch the establishment. It was less a game of skill and more a game of, will this sphere of volatile plastic take my eyebrows off today? Victorian innovation at its peak meant recreational activities that doubled as minor explosives training. Truly, a blast from the past, and quite possibly a blast in your past. 2. Victorians had an unhealthy obsession with legs. Not the human kind, you pervert, but furniture legs. Apparently, the mere sight of a bare piano leg or an unadorned table support was so scandalously erotic it could send a duchess into a fit of the vapors. Their solution? Dress the furniture. I'm not joking. Little frilly skirts, drapes, even tiny pantalettes for table legs, because God forbid Great Aunt Agatha glimpsed a provocative mahogany curve and had a conniption. Picture walking into a drawing room where the chaise lounge has more modesty garments than you do. Who gazes upon a table leg and screams, "Cover that filth, my delicate eyes." Only in an era where a sturdy oak commode could be considered a dangerous thirst trap needing urgent textile intervention. 3. Forget romantic sonnets and boxes of chocolates. Victorian Valentine's Day, for many, was a brutal, no-holds-barred roast battle delivered by the postman. Enter the Vinegar Valentine. Cheap, mass-produced cards designed not to woo, but to wound with surgical precision. These weren't playful jabs between mates. They were anonymous missiles of pure, unadulterated scorn, often featuring grotesque caricatures and verses like, "Your face, dear sir, could curdle milk from 20 paces hence." People dispatched these delightful missives with a disturbing level of glee. Postmen reportedly dreaded delivering them, as it often meant enduring a slapped face or a well-aimed teacup from the incandescent recipient. The artwork? Imagine if a deeply bitter political cartoonist had a personal vendetta against your schnoz. 4. In Victorian times, a beard wasn't just facial hair. It was a hairy billboard proclaiming your masculinity, wisdom, and probably your stance on the latest sewage reform bill. A truly magnificent chin pelt could command respect, attract admiring glances, and perhaps even get you a discount on mutton. But maintaining such a glorious face mane? That was a dedicated, full-time occupation. Hence the invention of beard protectors, or beard bibs, tiny bespoke napkins for your whiskers, ensuring no stray soup droplet or gravy splash could besmirch your follicular splendor. Special beard-cradling pillows were designed for napping, preventing any unseemly compression of the carefully coiffed mane. Some true believers even thought stroking one's beard made one demonstrably smarter. 5. Want to express undying affection in the Victorian era? Skip the flowers. How about a charming bracelet woven from the actual hair of your deceased great-aunt Mildred? Yes, hair jewelry was the absolute pinnacle of sentimental, if slightly creepy fashion. Lockets, brooches, rings, entire family trees rendered in meticulously braided human follicles. It was all the rage. Imagine complimenting a lady on her intricate necklace. "Oh, this old thing. It's Cousin Bartholomew, passed from consumption last spring. Isn't the herringbone weave simply divine?" It sounds like something from a taxidermist's nightmare, but back then, it was considered profoundly touching, a tangible way to keep loved ones close. Literally. Etsy would have had an entire post-mortem plating category. 6. Being buried alive was a legitimate, top-tier Victorian phobia, and given their doctors sometimes confused a sherry-induced coma with actual death, it wasn't entirely irrational. So, ingenious minds invented safety coffins. These weren't just sturdy boxes. They were subterranean escape pods for the prematurely interred. We're talking built-in bells to ring if you woke up feeling a bit peckish 6 feet under, air tubes for that crucial oxygen, little flags to wave for attention, and sometimes even a tiny snack compartment, presumably stocked pre-burial. Some designs featured elaborate systems of levers and escape hatches, because nothing says, "I'm not quite ready for the choir invisible," like clawing your way out of your own grave during the eulogy. 7. Thought your dinner parties were a bit pedestrian? Victorians had a killer app for that. Mummy unwrapping parties. Yes, affluent individuals would purchase actual ancient Egyptian mummies, though their authenticity was occasionally questionable, invite their poshest friends over for an evening of sophisticated entertainment, and then proceed to publicly unfurl a 3,000-year-old dignitary like he was a particularly stubborn roll of wallpaper. I say, Lord Ashworth, more sherry. And would you mind holding on to Tutankhamun's toe while I tackle this rather resilient bandage? It was marketed as educational, a thrilling glimpse into antiquity. In reality, it was rich people desecrating a corpse for shits and giggles, probably while complaining about the lingering aroma of natron. 8. Hysteria. In the Victorian medical playbook, this was the go-to diagnosis for virtually any woman exhibiting emotions, independent thoughts, or even just having a pulse. Felt tired after chasing 6 kids and wearing a corset that could strangle a horse? Hysteria. Had an opinion about anything that wasn't embroidery? Absolutely hysterical. The treatment? Oh, just a very hands-on doctor's visit designed to help the lady reach what they delicately called a hysterical paroxysm. This translated to the patient leaving slightly more relaxed and the physician needing a nap. Eventually, doctors got tired of all that wrist work, so, naturally, they invented a machine to handle the job. That's right. The first vibrators were less about pleasure and more about keeping women emotionally stable. Victorian medicine, solving problems no one asked about in the most awkward way possible. 9. Victorian fashion wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a potential death trap. Those enormous bell-shaped crinoline hoop skirts that made women glide like elegant, oversized jellyfish? They were ridiculously flammable. One careless brush against an open fireplace, one dropped candle, and whoosh! The wearer was instantly engulfed in a cage of fire. Thousands of women are estimated to have perished or suffered horrific burns because their fashionable attire was basically kindling shaped like a bell. And good luck trying to perform a stop, drop, and roll when you're encased in steel hoops and several acres of highly combustible fabric. Sidling through doorways was a complex logistical challenge, and avoiding open flames was less a precaution and more a critical survival strategy. 10. Tooth transplants. From the poor or dead to the rich. Need a new molar, darling? Don't fret. Just pop down to the local tooth snatcher. Wealthy Victorians with rotting grins could actually buy replacement teeth. The freshest ones came straight from the mouths of the desperate poor, willing to sell their chompers for cash. If that wasn't an option, there was always grave robbing. Dentists would happily yank teeth from recently deceased individuals and implant them into their affluent clients. It was like an antique dental swap meet, only significantly more gruesome and likely to give you a host of unspeakable infections. Hygiene standards were, shall we say, more of a suggestion than a rule. Imagine your smile being a patchwork of other people's dental misfortunes. 11. If you were a working-class bloke in Victorian England and fancied a divorce, the official channels were often prohibitively expensive and agonizingly slow. So, some chaps opted for a more direct marketplace solution: wife selling. Yes, you read that correctly. A man would lead his wife, sometimes with a symbolic rope or halter around her waist or neck as if she were prize livestock, to a public market or pub, and literally auction her off to the highest bidder. Going once, going twice on this fine specimen. Makes a passable stew, only moderately prone to fits of pique. Crowds would actually gather for these bizarre spectacles, and newspapers sometimes reported on them with a sort of detached amusement. Of course, it wasn't legally sanctioned. 12. Forget your modern emojis and witty text messages. Victorians had a far more elaborate and perilous system for conveying emotion: the language of flowers. This wasn't just about red roses signifying love. Oh no, floriography was an intricate code where every single bloom, leaf, and even the way they were arranged carried a specific, nuanced meaning. A sprig of basil might mean hatred, while a white lily signified purity. You couldn't just casually hand someone a bouquet. You were sending a meticulously crafted, potentially scandalous silent message. Giving someone a yellow carnation meant disdain. A poorly chosen combination of daffodils and marigolds could inadvertently end a friendship or even declare war on your unsuspecting neighbor. 13. Feeling a bit off-color? Suffering from a touch of the dreaded ennui, or perhaps a sluggish liver? Well, in Victorian times, a forward-thinking physician might have earnestly recommended you strap on an electric corset or an electropathic belt. That's right. Wearable devices that delivered mild electrical currents were marketed as miracle cures for an astonishingly wide array of ailments. You'd buckle yourself into one of these curious contraptions, perhaps complete with metallic discs pressed against your skin, and let the gentle or not-so-gentle zaps stimulate your vital organs or restore your nervous energy, according to the pseudoscience of the week. It didn't particularly matter if it actually worked. 14. Ugly laws. Seriously, laws against being ugly in public. If you thought your local HOA was bad, try Victorian ugly laws. Actual ordinances in some cities, particularly in America, but reflecting Victorian anxieties, made it illegal for people deemed unsightly, maimed, disfigured, or diseased to appear in public. The rationale? Their appearance might offend the delicate sensibilities of normal citizens or, heaven forbid, lower property values. So if you had a prominent birthmark, a missing limb, or just didn't fit the Victorian ideal of beauty, you could literally be fined or jailed for simply existing in a public space. It was state-sanctioned discrimination disguised as public decency, proving that some eras preferred their problems to be conveniently out of sight. 15. Victorian London had a rat problem, a massive, scurrying, plague-on-legs rat problem. But fear not, for they had professional rat catchers. And these individuals weren't just humble pest controllers, some were practically folk heroes, gritty celebrities of the grimy urban underworld. Armed with sacks, ferrets, poisons, and often accompanied by squads of specially trained terriers who were themselves minor stars of the rat-slaying circuit, they would stride into infested basements and warehouses like hardened action heroes ready for a rodent rumble. Some rat catchers even held public rat-killing performances where eager crowds would gather to watch terriers ferociously dispatch dozens of rats in purpose-built pits. 16. Spiritualism in the Victorian era wasn't some niche, candlelit cult. It was a full-blown social phenomenon, a mainstream obsession that captivated millions, from scullery maids to Queen Victoria herself. Seances became the hottest ticket in town, a fashionable and thrilling way to spend an evening. You'd gather with your poshest friends in a dimly lit drawing room, hold hands around a wobbly table which was often deliberately designed to wobble, and wait with bated breath as a self-proclaimed medium attempted to contact the dear departed. The table might tilt or levitate, often with the discreet help of the medium's knee or hidden mechanisms. Mysterious rapping sounds would emanate from the beyond, and curtains might flutter inexplicably. 17. Children's toys in the Victorian era often looked utterly charming, colorful, and delightfully innocent. However, lurking beneath that whimsical veneer was a hidden, toxic danger. Many were painted with substances containing lead, arsenic, and other delightful heavy metals. That bright, cheerful red paint on a beloved rocking horse? Likely lead-based, perfect for a spot of accidental poisoning if chewed upon by an unsuspecting toddler. Those vibrant green alphabet blocks, intended for early learning? Probably colored with arsenic-laced Scheele's green, a popular but notoriously deadly pigment. The shinier and more eye-catching the toy, the higher the probability it was essentially a miniature, beautifully crafted chemical weapon. 18. If you think modern endurance sports are a bit much, let me introduce you to the uniquely Victorian spectacle of pedestrianism, otherwise known as competitive professional walking. Yes, walking. But this wasn't a gentle constitutional in the park. This was hardcore, multi-day, often non-stop, 1,000-lap marathons around indoor arenas or outdoor tracks, undertaken for substantial prize money and the roar of adoring crowds. Huge audiences would gather, placing bets and cheering on their favorite peds, as these athletes, often clad in surprisingly flamboyant outfits, paced relentlessly in circles like highly caffeinated, incredibly stubborn zombies on a mission. Some walkers hallucinated from sleep deprivation. 19. The arrival of railways was the Concorde moment of the Victorian era. Cutting-edge, revolutionary, and absolutely terrifying to a significant chunk of the population. Some people genuinely, earnestly believed that traveling at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour, a velocity considered practically warp speed, could cause a host of horrifying physiological and psychological calamities. Respected medical professionals solemnly warned that the human body simply wasn't built for such velocities. They cautioned that women's wombs might become dislodged from the jarring motion, eyeballs could melt from the sheer speed, or internal organs might be violently ejected. There were fears that the rapid succession of images whizzing past the train window could induce madness. 20. If you thought navigating a modern funeral was emotionally taxing, you haven't encountered Victorian mourning etiquette. It was an incredibly complex, rigidly enforced social code that dictated not just what you wore, but for precisely how long, depending on your exact relationship to the dearly departed. Wearing black after a death wasn't a matter of a few days or weeks. It could be months or even years of somber attire. Full, deep mourning for a husband, for instance, could last 2 years or more, involving specific dull fabrics like crepe, a material notoriously uncomfortable and expensive, and a total absence of any frivolous embellishment. Half mourning for a second cousin twice removed? That might be 6 months. 21. Fancy a comforting bowl of turtle soup? In the Victorian era, this was considered a sophisticated delicacy, but actual turtle was often eye-wateringly expensive and hard to come by. So, what did resourceful cooks devise? Mock turtle soup. It sounds innocent enough, perhaps a clever vegetable broth with some clever spicing. Oh, how delightfully wrong you would be. The primary ingredient for achieving that authentic turtle-like texture and rich, savory flavor was often a calf's head. Yes, an entire calf's head, boiled down with its brains, tongue, and all the wobbly, gelatinous bits to create a soup that was supposed to closely imitate the real, reptilian thing. Restaurants and home cooks prided themselves on the realism of their mock turtle concoctions. 22. The Great Stink of 1858 in London wasn't some quaint euphemism for a period of political unease. It was horrifyingly, overwhelmingly literal. The River Thames, which served the dual purpose of being a primary water source and an open sewer for the rapidly expanding metropolis, essentially transformed into a festering, bubbling, toxic soup of human and industrial waste. During an unusually hot summer, the stench emanating from the polluted river became so overpoweringly foul, so intensely nauseating, that it brought the city to a virtual standstill. Members of Parliament, whose grand chambers were unfortunately located right next to the Thames, reportedly had to flee mid-session, clutching handkerchiefs, which were often soaked in dubious chemicals, to their faces. 23. Ever experienced fog so thick you couldn't see your own shoes? Now imagine that fog liberally mixed with acrid coal smoke, industrial soot, and a delightful cocktail of airborne pollutants. That, my friends, was a pea super, the notorious, dense, often yellowish-green or brownish fog that frequently and suffocatingly enveloped Victorian London and other major industrial cities. Streetlights became useless, ghostly glows in the oppressive, tangible murk. Horses and their equally bewildered drivers would get hopelessly lost, sometimes for hours. People occasionally carried ropes or held hands in a human chain simply to stay connected while navigating the streets. In the worst instances, visibility could drop to mere inches. 24. And then there was the utterly baffling phenomenon of pterodomania, or fern fever. a bizarre and all-consuming botanical craze that gripped Victorian Britain with the tenacity of a particularly enthusiastic creeper. People, especially women of a certain social standing, became absolutely, obsessively infatuated with ferns. They collected them with religious fervor, pressed them into albums, framed them as art, drew them with painstaking detail, and arranged them artfully under elegant glass domes known as Wardian cases. Entire garden grottos and dedicated ferneries were constructed in their honor. It wasn't just a casual hobby. For many, it became a fervent, all-encompassing lifestyle. Fern hunts in the countryside were popular. 25. Post-mortem photography was a common, if somewhat unsettling to modern eyes, Victorian practice. In an era characterized by high infant and child mortality rates, and long before photography became widely accessible and affordable for everyday snapshots, a photograph taken after death was often the only visual memento a grieving family would possess of a deceased loved one, especially a child. These poignant images weren't typically intended to be gruesome. Photographers went to considerable lengths to make the deceased appear as if they were merely sleeping peacefully or reposing in quiet dignity. Subjects were often posed with favorite toys, tucked into bed, or even propped up in chairs. 26. The curious case of the fasting girls captivated and thoroughly bewildered the Victorian public. These were typically young women, often prepubescent or in their early adolescence, who claimed to be able to survive for extraordinary extended periods, months, or even, in some alleged cases, years, without consuming any food whatsoever. They became minor celebrities, drawing crowds of curious onlookers, devout religious pilgrims who perceived them as saintly figures touched by the divine, and deeply skeptical medical men eager to debunk them. Cases like that of Sarah Jacob, famously known as the Welsh fasting girl, were widely reported in the popular press, fueling endless speculation and debate. 27. Hidden mother. Photography is one of those peculiar Victorian quirks that is simultaneously practical, given the technological limitations of the era, and undeniably a bit creepy to contemporary sensibilities. To capture a clear photograph of an infant or very young child in an age of lengthy exposure times, often several seconds or even minutes, the child needed to remain perfectly still. This was, as any parent throughout history can attest, a near insurmountable challenge. So, ingenious photographers devised a solution. The mother, or sometimes a studio assistant or nanny, would be present in the photograph, physically holding the child still, but cleverly disguised or obscured from view. 28. Arsenic wasn't just the preferred poison for disgruntled heirs in Victorian novels, or a handy ingredient for painting children's toys lurid shades of green. It was also a surprisingly common component in cosmetics and even household wallpaper. Yes, women sought that fashionably pale, almost translucent, consumptive chic complexion by using face powders and skin lotions laced with arsenic, believing it would give them a delicate, ethereal, and tragically beautiful appearance. Simultaneously, the beautiful, vibrant green shades so popular in wallpapers and fabrics of the era, particularly the notorious Sheila's green and Paris green, were arsenic-based pigments. Living in a room papered with this fetching green wallpaper was a health hazard. 29. The water cure, or hydrotherapy, as it was more formally known, was an immensely popular and often shockingly extreme medical treatment throughout much of the 19th century. Proponents passionately believed that various applications of water, often in its coldest forms, could cure almost any ailment imaginable, from gout and chronic indigestion to insanity, and a wide range of vaguely defined female complaints. Treatments were frequently rigorous and, frankly, sounded terrifying. Patients might be forcibly wrapped in cold, wet sheets for hours on end, a treatment known as the dreaded wet sheet pack, subjected to powerful jets of icy water aimed at specific body parts, or made to endure multiple freezing baths per day, sometimes for extended periods. 30. Before the advent of modern sanitation systems and organized municipal waste disposal, Victorian cities faced the monumental and frankly disgusting daily challenge of dealing with vast quantities of human excrement. Enter the night soil men. These were hardy and presumably anosmic workers who, typically under the cover of darkness to minimize public offense, went from house to house, laboriously emptying privies, cesspits, and household latrines. It was an incredibly foul, physically demanding, and heavily socially stigmatized job, but it was absolutely essential for maintaining some semblance of public health, however rudimentary, in densely populated urban areas. They would collect the night soil in carts. 31. Freak shows and displays of human curiosities weren't niche. They were mainstream entertainment in the Victorian era. And the ethics? Practically non-existent. People with unusual conditions were turned into live attractions. Conjoined twins like Chang and Eng Bunker, little people like General Tom Thumb, who became an international sensation under P.T. Barnum. Giants, heavily tattooed performers, or anyone with a rare medical disorder, all fair game. These shows played to the public's obsession with the strange and the monstrous. And for the showman, it was a goldmine built on spectacle, shock, and shameless exploitation. 32. Coffin torpedoes, explosive grave defense systems, worried about resurrectionists, those charming folks who dug up fresh corpses for medical schools? The Victorians had a booming solution: coffin torpedoes. These weren't metaphorical. They were actual explosive devices designed to detonate if someone tampered with a grave. Imagine a grave robber, shovel in hand, suddenly encountering a tripwire connected to a small bomb packed with gunpowder or even shotgun shells. Rest in peace suddenly had a rather more literal and explosive interpretation. Some designs were elaborate, set to go off if the coffin lid was lifted. It was the ultimate stay away from my dearly departed message, ensuring grave robbers got a truly unforgettable send-off. 33. Victorian dining etiquette wasn't just strict. It was a full-blown culinary obstacle course disguised as sophistication. This wasn't about choosing the right fork for fish. Oh no, this was about wielding an arsenal of absurdly specific tools for foods you didn't even know needed rules. Asparagus tongs existed so you could delicately lift a single stalk without contaminating your noble fingers. Grape scissors? Yes, because tearing grapes like a peasant was unthinkable. Marrow scoops for digging into bones like a refined predator. Sardine forks, ice cream hatchets. And no, that's not a typo, meaning tiny ice cream hatchets. And don't even think about peeling an orange without a designated fruit knife and matching fork. If cutlery had a military ranking system, the Victorians had a 5-star general for every snack. Well, there you have it, Victorian England. Less about polite tea parties, more about exploding balls and electric underpants. Makes your weird uncle who collects toenail clippings seem downright normal, eh? So, which of these utterly bonkers historical tidbits made your jaw hit the floor? And what's the most absurd historical moment you know that we missed? Unleash your weirdest facts in the comments below. If this dive into delightful dumbness made you chuckle or question reality, hit that like button and subscribe for more unhinged history.